Hey, this is Joey or D-Legal or One or whatever, and this video is going to go over how I made this and the stuff I had to go through. And this was actually a collaboration between me and my friend Belle. So they sent me the drawing, or let me pull it up actually. They sent me this drawing, and I was going to be the one who animated it, or just get it to move or do something. So I'd get this, and then if I tried to get it to move, obviously I'd have to try to, cut things out and compensate for the pixels that might be missing. Like I was not doing actual, frame by frame drawing, and it probably would have looked better if I did do something like that. But everything involved here was just Photoshop and After Effects, and actually a little bit of 3ds Max because I wanted to get the gems in the background to rotate. So while Belle was drawing this, actually, I wanted to figure out a good way to get the gems in the back. And when I looked online for reference, the gems that people drew were always different. Like they did like a tetrahedron or some other weird shapes. So I just did let's see, I did this shape right here actually. And when wanted to make sure it was like still pixely and stuff. I wanted to make sure these lines are very, very thin so I can have it be, fit in the style of pixel art. And the problem with 3ds Max is that it doesn't render in such a way that gets you these like smooth aliased lines. Like if I try to render it right now, it's always going to be like smooth, no matter how much I reduce anti-aliasing or switch to, mental ray or whatever. Simply because the renderer does not work like that. Like I have to have anti-aliasing on, and if I just set it to 0, it's still going to, have all that noise and all that. Like I cannot get lines or like raster lines that you see here. So I ended up actually rendering out my viewport because that was the only place that 3ds Max could give me, these straight pixelated kind of lines. And the way I did that actually was just tools, preview, and then create preview animation. And I made sure it was very, very, very small so that I can, stuff the screen with. That's why I have a multiple over here, so I can have one render out and then just use that and then pick out whatever one. Like you'll see there's about 3 different diamond shapes or diamond sizes. I think actually 2. And let me see actually. I think I have it rendered out somewhere. Yeah, here it is. So this is the actual render that I had out from 3ds Max. And I would just cut out, whichever shapes I needed and, drag that into After Effects. And I also had a shaded version actually. And I used that just to have like, the top part be shiny and the bottom part be dark, darker. And so there's actually a gradation in the color, so there's not just one color for the whole diamond while it's rotating. And yeah, so there's the shaded that I had rendered out. And then, so I have After Effects open obviously, but this isn't the first thing I did. I'm just talking about the process that I did for this. So I'm not at this stage yet. At this stage, I'm only at, let's see, yeah, I'm at the part when I get the crystals and just bring it all together to get like this one, and this one, and the smaller one. So I'm at this point right now. None of this doesn't exist yet. And the only thing I have is this one that I rendered from 3ds Max and this one. And to get it to look like this was actually pretty simple. But I rendered it separately because I wasn't sure if I wanted to have the outlines in it. Like I wasn't sure if I was going to have it stay like this or if I was just going to have it be, this and just have like a glowy effect in the back. I actually have that somewhere. I did some other tests actually. Yeah, I think this was one of the tests. So it was going to look like, or not, it's not exactly like this, but I had that dithering pulse in the background that I didn't like too much actually. So this was another test actually. And I had like rings going around it, like these weird spell circles, but it was too much details to stuff in too little space. So I thought this shape was fine, and I just have it color that. And I might have another test actually. Yeah, this was another test where I had like the circle things going around it, and I cannot get good looking like circles because like the way After Effects kind of tries to rasterize these is like really messy. Like that whole shape was just really messy, and I couldn't really bother to do it hand by hand. Frame by frame, because it didn't seem worth it at this point. Like it seemed too busy because a lot of these are going to be stamped all over in the background. So this was scratched. This was going to be in. This is one of the things I went by. So I ended up sticking with these 3, and was just going to color them using a Colorama actually. So I'm at this stage, and then that's when I get this from Belle. So once I was finished with this, that was when I hopped into this. And the first thing I did with this was like I'm gonna get it to move, so I'm gonna need to prepare it so like these individual sprites. So I'd have it in Photoshop. So I'd get it like this, and I get it in Photoshop, and then I split it up. Like you'll see over here, there's a bunch of folders here, like your hair is missing. So I'd split things up, and then I'd have to compensate for the pixels that were like taken out. Like if I cut this out, if I cut out her hair, then obviously the pixels on this would be missing, and that's where I had to compensate. But you didn't have to do too much here. Depending on how much I was going to have it move, I didn't have to recreate too much, just fill in that purple right there. But at this point, I was planning how I was going to animate it. Like, her torso wasn't going to move much, except her eyes blinking. And her hair, I knew I was going to have move. And I knew her skirt was going to move, but I cut it off right here. Here, I'll see. I cut it off right here, because I knew it wasn't going to move much beyond this point. So right here, like enough of it would be hidden behind her sleeves. And her feet was going to be different because I knew this is going to move around over here. There's actually a mistake, actually. I'm going to mention that later. There's a little screw up that I did over here that made it into the final GIF. And the one thing I did actually animate was her eyes, and that's just blinking. It's nothing too exciting, just like these 4 frames. And it's all in one folder, so like if I remove this, she won't have any eyes, and that's just how it is by default. I had to cut out the eyes, compensate, and then I have, each frame for her eyes blinking. And I have it in its own composition, so when I bring it into After Effects, this will be its own thing I can organize later. So I'm only in Photoshop at this point. The only thing I had in After Effects was the rotating gems. And I think I was pretty much done with this at that point. There were a few times when I had to go into After Effects and then realize I needed more pixels to compensate. I think it was right here, because I had her hair move, but it would move away from this part, so I had to add more pixels there just to compensate. But the point is, we're splitting things up here. There isn't much I'm doing here besides that, and blinking. So there wasn't anything too advanced going on, so I was just splitting stuff up and animating the eyes. And at that point, I would bring it into After Effects. And let me see. So there she is. This is already animated. So that's her moving all. And I use Puppet Warp. And I don't like using Puppet Warp for pixel art, actually, because in general, like if you try to rotate pixel art, it'll get really, really bad, because they'll try to re-rationalize it and rotate it and canonicalize it to the grid and all that. Like you'll see how it kind of gets all splotchy right at her hair when it moves. And then there's also this banding that happens on her skirt that I wasn't too big of a fan of. Like I was thinking actually of doing this, rendering it out, and then bringing it back into Photoshop so I can go frame by frame and fix things up, but it was going to be seen at this level. And it looked generally fine at that point. I mean, the only thing, it was like, it's a really light movement, so it didn't really seem that worth it. And first thing I did, though, when I brought it in, was I made a null. And I made sure everything was parented to that. Like if I move this null here, she'll move too. And that's where I animated her, going up and down very slowly. And then after that, it's just having secondary motions happen. The skirt going down, and her hair going down, and the blinking, which is its own thing right here, actually. It's a timer map layer. Like if I was to go here, the only thing here are these layers that I made. So these are each of the frames. It's like this whole composition is only like 6 frames. And then when I bring it in here, it's a timer map. Like you'll see right here, there it is. So there's the first blink, there's a second blink. And there's a lot of parented to this too, so I don't have to worry about it, one thing moving down before the other, so it's all together. And then her hair was a Puppet Warp. Let me bring it up. Trying to make it show the mesh, but I had these 3 points. This point was to keep it down up here, and then these 2 points actually moved. So there's it going down, there's it going back up, and it loops. So just these 2 points are moving. Like that. And same for her back hair, actually. Her back hair doesn't have... I think most of the points for her back hair was on the top, just to keep it... Yeah. Yeah, see, there's a point here, and then these 2 keep it down over there. and they just add to the weight of her going up and down. And same thing for the skirt. The skirt was probably the hardest part, because I had to keep it down here, but I also want to keep things fluid and not too like scrunchy. Like you'll see, if I try to move this point too much, things get really, really, really messy. And if you bring it out too much, then it starts to bend. So I made sure this is very, very slight movement. Yeah, like you'll see there, it barely even moves like a complete 2 pixels. And the mistake actually, so this was the mistake I made. And I already exported the GIF while this was there, like right here. It's completely transparent, and that's because I didn't put enough pixels to compensate for that. Like if right now, if I was to go to Photoshop and let's see, find her, yeah, right there, see? That was the mistake I made. If I was to just like get this color and like dump it in there and save it, go back into After Effects, you'll see it's completely solved. But I already made the GIF at that point, so that's in the final version. That's in the final GIF actually. Let me see. Yeah, you'll see it right here. So that's my little mistake. But I mean, I guess I was probably the only one that noticed that. Let's see. So this was all done at that point. She was moving. I had everything fine, and then it was just to do the gems. And there's also the outline that you'll see. Then I'll talk about that later. So at that point, I was at this, and then I had to make the gems in the background. And let's see. For the gems, I believe yeah, okay, so I took one crystal. Like, let me remove all the effects here. So there's the outline, which is just an outer glow. Bring this up. So it's just an outer glow with one color. And then I made the size pulse up and down. So you see this pulse right here, like there, there, there. And it's actually, let's see. These are all moved like way out. There we go. So there's the pulse right there. And then I use the loop out expression right here that I discussed in the previous video to make it loop over and over again. Let's just visualize that. See, so pulse, pulse, and it keeps pulsing at that frequency. And then to actually color the rest of it, I used Colorama, which will like tint it. It'll remap all the colors to a different group of colors. Like you'll see right here. So this is where I would actually color it. Like I can make it green, and it'll tint the whole thing green. And so I made about 4 colors. So that, yeah, there's yellow, there's a red, and there's blue, and then there's green. There isn't too many greens. And then I had, yeah, there's 3 of the different ones that I made right here. Like there's the large one, and then there's the medium one, and then there are these very small ones. They all use the same effect. It's just different graphics, and there's an easy way to do that. Like if I want to make this small, I would have the layer selected, and then say I want to replace it with the small one. So I'd hold Alt, click this, and then drag it over. And this will just replace the source footage, but keep everything else the same. Like if I want to make it the medium one, I'd have the layer selected, Alt, click, drag it right over. And it replaces it. If I wanted to make it the big one, same thing. So that only replaces the source footage. It doesn't replace the effects that are applied to it. Let me just bring this back to what it was before. There, so I made that, made sure there was a lot of them. Or not too many. I wanted to make sure the big ones were behind her, and then the little ones were just scattered out here. And then they're all offset at different times. So you don't see them all pulsing at the same time. You see them kind of just all randomly doing their own thing. And they're all rotating. Like you don't see them all rotating at the same time, starting from the same time. So it's all looping. And, oh, I'm not using that one. So I had that in. So at that point I was, okay, I messed up my, there we go. At that point I had this. Didn't have the outline yet. I'm going to disable that actually. Oops. So this is where I was at that point. I had her going up and down, and I had the crystals. And what I usually do, like with foreground and background kind of stuff, is I gave her an outline. So her shape was cutting away from the gems in the background. And the way I did that was, like I have her already as a pre-composition. Ooh, I'm going to talk about that in a bit. So I had her already as a pre-composition, and I wanted her to have like a 1 pixel cutout of her background before you see the background stuff. So I cloned her, and I think this has an outer glow effect. Let me visualize this for a second actually. So there's her, and then she has, this is a copy of it, and it has a 1 pixel white. It doesn't matter what color actually. So this is like the default color. I just had it be a 1 pixel solid, size 1, spread 0, technique precise, all that. So it just expands her 1 pixel. And all I'm going to use from this is the alpha channel, so you don't actually see it. Like you'll see the eye here is actually hidden. And so this is the gem layer. I go to toggle switches and modes, and then track matte. Track matte is pretty much makes it like, it'll use the layer above it, and it'll assign it as the alpha channel, like the mask. And so what I did here was I used that one thing with the 1 pixel outline, and I did alpha matte, or not alpha matte, alpha inverted matte. So now this shape is actually cutting out the layer below it. You'll see right here. Like if I move this layer now, oops, if I move her now, you'll see how it's masking it. And since this is 1 pixel expanded, that means if I bring back the other layer, there's going to be that 1 pixel outline. And it's transparent too, since it's cutting out of it. And it'll work with the animation too. So now she's cutting out of the background, so there's that distinct foreground background thing going on. And at any time I can go here, make it the size 2, and the outline sticker, make the size 5. And it'll still work. I kept it at 1. So I have that going on. And I was pretty satisfied at this point, but I always had, there's a lot of gems, in magic and all that. So I made sure that I had sparkles. And I had a pre-made, glitter GIF from a long time ago. It isn't too special. It's pretty, simple. And I put it in its own composition since I was going to have it pulse, as its own thing. So it's going to have the loop out expression as well. And there isn't too many of these, actually. It's just all these here. So this is where all the glitter comes in. Like the sparkle here. I'll just follow this one. Oh, it's the top one too, so. You see, it's just a timer map. So I'll just start over with this one. So I'll get rid of timer mapping. So I would bring in the glitter GIF, and it'd be like this. It'd just play once, and it'd go away. Or wait, is that the right one? Oh, the bottom one is actually, okay, so there's 2, by mistake. So this is how it would be like. Play once, it would go away. Then timer mapping. So now you see it expand to the whole thing, but it's only going to go from start to finish, and it's going to hold that last frame. Oh wait, it already has loop out on it. So it'd be like this. It play once, and it'll hold that last frame. And then you do loop out cycle, and it'll loop it. It'll go on forever. And then all you have to do with this, if you wanted to have it, start at an alternate time, is shift it. And it'll still follow through. Or I'll have it show the graph so you can kind of see it. See how it's shifted now. So there's the glitter. And then just stamping it, appropriately. Like if I put it, stamping it here, and then putting the green color correction on it. Putting one here with blue. There you go. And the gems are actually moving up and down. Forgot to mention that. But before that, just now, when I tried to move her, and how she's blurring up right when I move her. I explained this in the last video, but I want to make sure I make this clear. Because right now, their quality is set to bilinear, so that means like if I move it and it goes in between pixels, it's gonna try and like approximate it, and it's gonna blur it like that. But I do not want that because this is pixel art, you know. So set the quality so it's the stair step, which is nearest neighbor interpolation. So now if I move it, it's just gonna stick to the pixel grid. It's very important because especially when you render it, you're gonna want to make sure it's gonna be set to current settings. So there. Now it's maintain the whole pixelness. And at this point, it was done. I mean, this is the point when I showed them, and they were, satisfied with it. But I wasn't too satisfied with how the colors were at this point. So I had an adjustment layer right here just to make things a little more vibrant. And it's just the color curves right here. Like, I'll show the difference. So this is without it, and this is with. And it was only for the gems, because the colors were this were fine. Like, if I put it above, you'll see it change the colors. It's a little weird. So I made sure it was only on the gems. And then at this point this point was when I made the GIF, actually. So this is the final product that I had. With the mistake right here. So I gotta catch stuff like that before I make the GIF next time. And that's pretty much it. So when I want to render this, composition, add to render queue. You see some of my previous test renders here. Oops. And then right here on render settings, drop this, current settings. And this makes it so whatever you see here is going to be what you get out. Because if you do best settings, it's going to try and maximize the quality, and it's going to make this, it's going to make any quality settings here, like all this stuff, it's going to reset that to be bilinear, and it's going to make it blurry again. You want to make sure it looks like this. Like the same way you see it here is exactly what you're going to get. So make sure this is set to current settings. And that should be it.